Hello and welcome back to a series of spooky stories, The Haunted Tea Spill. This series is brought to you by all things spooky and ungodly amounts of paranormal activity. Featuring my smart ring, the pink one will be linked down here, but there is gold and silver as well. It keeps up with everything the Apple Watch does. It'll be down here, now onto the story. When I was a little girl, I had something attached to me. It looked exactly like me, according to my mom. Would that be like a doppelganger? She told me that one night she was checking on me and saw that I was sitting on the foot of my bed facing the headboard. She asked me if I was okay, and I didn't respond. She asked again, and I put my finger to my lips and shushed her. A long shh. You got it. Then I pointed to the head of the bed where I was sleeping. Oh fuck no. Oh fuck no. No, no, no. The real me. She turned on the lights and whatever was on the foot of the bed vanished. Fast forward a few years, my sister is now about the same age that I was when that happened. My mom and I were folding laundry and cracking jokes. Out of the corner of our eyes, we see my sister come up to us and stand in the doorway with her head down. My mom asks her what's wrong, and she gets no answer. She asks again, and my sister puts her fingers to her lips and shushes us. Points to the living room where my sister is actually asleep on the couch. What the fuck do you mean? The spirit vanished when we looked up at it. For a long time after that, my sister would talk about a friend she made on the bus that no one else could see. This friend would tell her to do things that got my sister in trouble a lot. One day she was playing with her friend and she started yelling. I said, no, I got in a lot of trouble that last time. I'm not going to do it again. Began hysterically crying, running to our mom saying that her friend was going to hurt her if she didn't listen. Pardon? She came back inside later, bleeding and saying that she had been pushed down the stairs. We're both adults now and still very creeped out about it all. Yeah, that's definitely creepy. Would that be a doppelganger? That sounds like, it sounds like a doppelganger. I don't fucking know. I get shit wrong all the time. What are your thoughts? Tell me in the comments. Also, rate it on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the least scary, creepy, spooky, 10 being the most. If you have a story of your own that you want to submit, you can do so on the link tree in my profile. Please don't forget to go follow my backup page. I'm saving for a car. Any money that I make off of that account will be going towards my car jar. And this shit is expensive. I'll see you all at the next episode. Stay spooky, friends.
What would you do if your friend talked you into going to a cemetery at night with a Ouija board, and then they were never the same again? This is Scared with Jess, and today's story is about two friends who went to a cemetery, but only one of them left. This happened when I was in college. I had a friend who got really into paranormal stuff for a while. She always was talking about haunted places near campus, old roads outside of town, abandoned buildings, graveyards, anything like that. She loved all of it. Videos, stories, spirit boxes, even Ouija boards. I didn't take it seriously the way she did, but I ended up going with her sometimes because I tried to just make the most of everything. One Friday night, she texted me and asked if I wanted to drive out to an old cemetery outside of town because she had something good and wanted to try it there. I already knew what she meant. I asked if she was bringing the board, and she said yes. I should have said no. I didn't. I thought we'd sit there for a little while, get creeped out, and then leave. And that was honestly all I expected. We got there close to midnight. The cemetery was outside of town, past the last gas station, and down one of those roads that gets darker than you'd expect once you're off the highway. No lights out there except what you bring with you. It was older too, leaning headstones and gravel lanes, and also trees hanging over the back fence. I had a real flashlight with me because I hated using just my phone at night, and she had the board in her backpack. We walked toward the back because she said that was where it felt better, which should tell you exactly what kind of mood she was in. And at first I was mostly annoyed. She put the board down on a flat stone ledge and started whispering questions into the dark like we were at some movie. I kept telling her to stop because it felt embarrassing more than anything. I was cold and tired and just really ready to go probably 5 minutes after we got there. Then the planchette moved, and at first I thought she was doing it herself. I told her to knock it off, and she looked at me right away, and I remember her face because all the color had gone out of it. She looked sweaty around her mouth, and her eyes were too open. She said, "I'm not doing that." Then the thing scraped hard across the board. That sound changed the whole feeling of the night for me. I stepped back, and she leaned in closer. She asked real quiet, "What do you want?" I didn't hear anything. She did. I know she did because she nodded like somebody had answered her. That was when I wanted out for real. I said her name and told her we were leaving. I reached down to grab the board and she smacked my hand away so hard it stung. And then she started talking. Not to me. Her eyes stayed on the board the whole time. She'd say a few words, she'd stop, she'd listen, and then answer again. I caught pieces of it. No, stop. I didn't bring her for that. That line hit me hard enough that I took another step back. I told her to get up, and she didn't. I said it again louder. Then she looked at me. Her mouth was hanging open a little. She looked sick, not tired and not freaked out, but sick. Her skin had that wet look people get right before they throw up. And then she smiled. I backed away from her right then, and she stood up. 1 second she was bent over the board, and the next she was on her feet with her head tilted toward me and her arms hanging loose. And then she laughed. I had heard her laugh plenty of times before that night, and that sound wasn't hers. It came out low and rough. It sounded like it was tearing its way out of her throat. I turned and started walking fast toward the path back to the car. And behind me, I heard her step off the stone. And then I heard her running. I swung the flashlight back over my shoulder for 1 second and caught her between the graves. And that picture still gets me. Her mouth was open wider now. Blood was coming out of one nostril, and her eyes had rolled up so far I could barely see anything except white. Her face looked wet, and the skin around her mouth looked stretched tight. She was coming at me, fast, enough that I stopped thinking and just ran. After that, it was a blur. Headstones flashing through the beam, gravel sliding under my shoes, and branches scraping my arms. I could hear her behind me the whole time, sometimes laughing and sometimes making this awful choking sound like she was trying to force words out and couldn't get them. At one point, I heard my name, and that almost made me trip. I made it to the car first by maybe a few seconds. I got inside and locked the doors and turned the flashlight back toward the cemetery. She hit the passenger window so hard the whole car shook. I screamed, and she stood there with both hands on the glass, staring in at me. Blood all over her face, mouth hanging open, and eyes rolled up. She looked empty and furious at the same time. And then she said in that same wrecked voice, "Let me in." I threw the car into reverse so hard I nearly hit one of the stones posts at the entrance. I got turned around and I hit the road and I drove back to the campus shaking so badly I could barely keep the wheel straight. I called her 3 times on the way back, but there was no answer. I texted and I called again from my room, and there was still nothing. The next day, nobody had heard from her. A few days later, people started saying she must have left town, dropped out or gone home, or had some kind of mental breakdown. That was the version everybody settled on because it was easier to say than anything else. I never saw her again, and I went back once in daylight with 2 other girls because I couldn't stand not knowing what was still out there. The board was near the back where we had left it, split clean in half, and carved into the wood beside it deep enough to leave pale marks was my name. I have never touched a Ouija board again, and I still think about the day she looked through that passenger window, not because I thought she needed help, but because I knew she wanted in. Anyway, good luck sleeping tonight.
This spooky scary story time came from someone named Bella. That's not her real name. I gave her that name due to the nature of the story, which you will be able to put 2 and 2 together in just a minute. So Bella says that 10 years ago, she moved to this very small, tight-knit community of Irish people just outside of Boston. And she's not Irish, she was like an outsider, but these people were extremely friendly to her, accepted her, and she always hung out at this one pub. But at the pub was this other guy who was part of this community, and there was a hierarchy of power and popularity, which is like any small town. But she says this guy really just did not seem to like her for whatever reason. And she calls him Liam for this story, not his real name either. But Liam was always making these very like chauvinistic remarks to her anytime she would go to the pub and he was there and she would order a drink. He would be like, oh, are you sure you want a drink and you don't want to go to the nail salon to get your nails done? And she was just like, what is this dude's problem with me? And despite having some mutual friends with Liam, he just kind of like was always making these snarky remarks to her. And she was just like, I don't know what it is about this guy. So she said that she always just tried to ignore it, brush it off. And at the time, she was living in a shared house with 3 other roommates. And because she didn't really know these roommates that well, and it was a mix of guys and girls, she always slept with her door locked. Her bedroom was on the 2nd floor of the house. And one night she goes to the pub and she drinks quite a bit. It was September, so the air was cold and crisp. And she had been living in her house for about a year at that point. And so had known these people at the pub for about a year at that point. And she goes home from the pub and she falls asleep in her bed with the window cracked to let the September air in. And her bed was pushed against the wall just next to the window. She said she didn't often sleep with the window open because it was an older house and the windows would stick. But on this night, it felt fine. It felt safe. And she was on the 2nd floor anyway. So she passes out. A little while after she fell asleep, she is awoken to the sound of someone pushing the heavy old window open further, and she opens her eyes and she sits up in bed, and outside of her window she can see Liam, and she's so confused because she's on the 2nd floor and someone would have needed a ladder to get up there, but he's outside of her window and he's staring in. And she's like, what are you doing here? And she's like thinking, is he into me? She said she wasn't necessarily scared. It was just shocking to see him. But at least she recognized him. And she's like, I'm not into you like that. Are you trying to sneak in? You trying to do something? You trying to pull a move? And keep in mind, she had a couple drinks, so she wasn't thinking completely clearly. And he's shushing her and he's like, no. I'm not here for that. I'm here because I'm a vampire and I need blood to drink. And she's like, I beg your finest pardon. And he's still at the window and he's like, well, I've seen you help out so many other people at the pub. I thought you would maybe help me out too. And she said whatever came over her was something like a trance because she was not thinking logically, but she got up out of bed and she walked toward the window and he leaned in slightly and bit her hand. And she said she remembers that she was feeling embarrassed about her blood because she had been out drinking and she told him this. She was like, I probably don't taste that good. But keep in mind, she's not thinking clearly. She said it was like there was this haze over her. But he says, yeah, I know you've been drinking. That's why I chose you. It actually gives me a little bit of a buzz. She remembers nodding and saying that she understood. And then after that, it was all black. And so she woke up in the morning. She's like, that was the wildest dream I've ever had. Why am I dreaming about this man who can't stand me and who I really don't like either? But then she looked at her hand and she noticed that she had 2 small puncture wounds, which she did send me a picture of. I'll put them on the screen. And then she looked at her window and she noticed that the window was now fully open. And when she had gone to bed, it was only slightly cracked. It had gotten a little bit colder outside, so she got up to close the window. And when she pushed down on her hand on the bed to help herself up, she noticed how sore her hand was. And she was just like, that is the weirdest thing. She's like, did I bite myself in my sleep? Because that's how confusing this dream was to her. And so she tried to bite her other hand to see if it would leave similar marks, but it didn't. After a couple of days, the puncture wounds in her hand still had not gone down at all. They hadn't swelled up either. It was just, they were just there and her hand was still sore. And she was coming up with every excuse she could possibly think of to make herself justify what had happened. She's like, it's an insect bite. It's something else. But then she goes back to the pub and one night she ends up drinking with this older guy who's well respected in this small, tight-knit community. And he's one of Liam's colleagues. And she ends up telling him this story, thinking that he's going to laugh and tell her she's crazy. And she's like, isn't that just the wildest dream? But instead he gets this very serious look on his face and he sternly warns her not to tell anyone else about what she experienced. And she was like, okay. And he's like, definitely do not bring this up to anyone. And she said she did see Liam after that, but she didn't want to bring it up to him because she didn't want him running around town telling everyone that she was a lunatic. And she didn't even necessarily believe that had actually happened either, though the warning was strange. And as far as Liam went, he acted like business as usual. He was still mean to her at the bar. His attitude toward her did not change after this dream. The only other notable encounter she had with him was years later. She had already moved out of that community and never really went back or saw him again. But she went back on one occasion and was hanging out with some old friends and they ended up going to the pub and he was there. But somehow he looked younger than the last time she had seen him. And so he gets to talking with some of their mutual friends and they're all telling him, like, you look so good. What is your secret? Because he worked in construction. So it's not like he had like a cushy desk job or something like that. And he just says, oh, I had a very extensive medical procedure done. And they're like, what medical procedure did you have done? He's very vague, but he was like, it's very expensive. It was very expensive. It's not important what it's called. And they were just like, oh, that's weird because normally construction types of guys don't get these very expensive facelifts, like, wouldn't you prefer a new house or a new truck or whatever? And he says, it's just what I care about. So why are you guys so concerned with how I look? And they're like, no, we didn't mean to offend you. It's just, you look good and we want to know your secret. So she said she still does see him once in a blue moon at like a concert or a big event, because they still do live in the same state. So that's why she wanted to remain anonymous. But she said, so what do you all think? Was it just a drunken dream, or was there something to it? She's fully aware it may not have been a real experience, but still a strange coincidence, to say the least. This is Spooky Scary Storytime, the series where we share listeners' allegedly true stories about the creepiest or most unsettling things that they've ever experienced. If you have a story you think nobody would believe, no matter how weird it is, send it in. We would love to hear it. I love the weird ones.
People are charging and running behind you, but when you turn around, there's no one there. Tonight's ghost story is called The Bell That Called the Dead. This story is from a guy called Stuart, so thank you, Stuart, for sending it to us. And if you've got a ghost story, go to my profile, click message and send me yours. I'd love to hear it. If you're not already, hit the follow button. Stuart says, this happened to me in the early 2000s. I was visiting a friend who lived next to the Biggin Hill airfield. He says, my mate had to go into work for a few hours, and me being a total history nerd, went to explore the airfield, especially the one area that still had buildings from World War II still up. When walking between the two shelters, I could 100% hear a bell ringing and the sound of people running from behind me. He says I was hit by a blast of freezing air. He says I turned to look behind me and there was a sound of footsteps running and it was just freezing cold. He says I turned and walked very quickly. I just wanted to get the hell out of there. We don't blame you. Later the next day, I popped into a local place who had a display of photos of the base at the height of the Battle of Britain. I played dumb with the guy there. I didn't say anything had happened to me. And he said there were some shelters still up. And again playing dumb, I let him explain all about the location. Then he says it's the dispersal area for the RAF fighters. And the signal to get the fighters into the air was with a bell ringing. And with the sound of that bell, you would see pilots running to their aircraft. Wow. That is an actually epic thing to witness, isn't it? Like, what the actual hell? I have had some really cool stories from military bases. If you've got one, please tell me yours. Go to my profile, click message and send me yours. There's also a contact form in my link if you want to click that and send a message that way instead. However you want to get it to me, I can't wait for the ghost tea and I'll catch you in the next one.
Oh my gosh. A trucker, alone, middle of the night, West Virginia. Something climbed onto the back of his rig. Once again, we've got a really good one out of the Appalachia. I just came across this story and immediately I need to share this with you. This is a long haul trucker hauling a heavy load of industrial coils towards Columbus. By the time he hit the heart of West Virginia, the sun had long gone down. So he peels off the interstate onto a secondary road, looking for a place that he could park up for the night. It was dead zone country and his phone was flickering in and out of signal. And then he saw a rusted neon sign for a fuel stop, and at that point he did not care what it looked like. He just needed to get some rest. The lot had cracked concrete and the gravel had weeds pushing up through it. He noticed that two other rigs were parked there, but they were both dark and silent. He said they looked more like graveyard monuments than working vehicles. He said the air was thick with damp pine and old diesel. It was around 11 p.m. and he opens the door and jumps down from the truck just to stretch his legs a bit. So he's leaning against the fender with his coffee in his hand, just resting and breathing. And he said he could hear this high-pitched whining sound coming from the lights. And then he noticed some movement. It was down near a guardrail that was separating a lot from a wooded ravine. So he's trying to make out what this is. And at first he thought maybe it was a stray dog or a deer. But he says the movements were just all wrong. It was moving on all fours with this strange fluid motion. And its arms and legs were way too long for its torso. And he said it was pale, not white, but like this bruised looking translucent gray. He describes the texture of its skin as hairless and smooth. It looked like a wet river stone. He said, curiosity got the better of me, and he found himself walking towards it. Like, sir, are we serious? So he's walking toward the edge of the lot, and his boots are crunching way too loudly on the gravel. As he reached the guardrail, he could see it clearly now in the perimeter light. He said it was crouched over something, and its spine was curved like a bow. He said at first glance it looked fragile, but there was a tension in its posture that screamed predator. And then he accidentally kicked a loose stone over the edge. The sound of this stone bouncing down the ravine was like a starter pistol. Oh my God, guys. He said this creature didn't just look up, it uncoiled. It rose onto its hind legs and stretching upright until it was nearly 6 feet tall. Oh my God, I love this description. He said it looked like a human reflected in a funhouse mirror. There was no nose, no ears, and just sunken black pits for eyes. He said it opened its mouth. It was a jagged, dark slit. And then this sound came out of it, unlike anything he has ever heard before. He said it was a high-pitched metallic shriek that vibrated his teeth. Oh my God, I have so many goosebumps. He said he didn't wait. He started to slowly back away, keeping his eyes locked on those dark pits for eyes on this creature. He said he never turned his head. He just kept creeping backwards until his hand hit the door of his truck. So he scrambles inside, slams the door, and locked it so hard he almost snapped the lever. So now he's sitting in the dark cab and he is just staring out the side mirror as he is trying to catch his breath. His heart was hammering, his hands were shaking as he just waited. And then he heard it, a dry, rhythmic scratching against the passenger side fuel tank, followed by heavy, deliberate sounds of something circling the trailer. It moved slow and intentional, like it was looking, searching for a way in. And then the suspension made a groaning sound. This thing climbed up onto his rig. He says he sat in that driver's seat with a tire iron in his lap all night long. When the first light of dawn started to emerge, he got the heck out of there. He said when he finally worked up the courage to leave, he didn't even check his tires. He just went. And he just drove and he kept driving. And it wasn't until he found a very busy and bustling truck stop 3 hours later till he got out and circled the rig to check it. Okay, so get this. Along one of the sides of the truck were 3 deep carved in slashes right into the metal. It was like something with a very steady, very deliberate grip sliced down the entire length of the cab. He says that since then, he has spent a lot of time on those CB radios, swapping stories with other truckers that go on those Appalachia hauls. He says that the old timers, the ones that have been driving those roads for decades, don't even bat an eye when he tells that story. They just kind of laugh it off and then tell him the same thing every time. Keep your doors locked, eyes on the white line. He says they have a name for them. They refer to them as the pale ones or the grays. They are said to haunt the abandoned mines and the deep hollers where the sunlight never quite touches the floor. Whatever this trucker saw that night wasn't an animal. And he knows it wasn't a ghost. It is something living in those mountains since before the roads were even paved. And it didn't seem particularly happy that he stopped by to say hello. All right, guys, what are your thoughts? Drop them down in the comments. I freaking love these Appalachia stories. And can someone identify what they think that cryptid was? Let me know. And if you have a creepy story of your own, you know what to do. And if you're new here, you got to follow for more creepy story time.
There was this man named Jonathan. Now, Jonathan said when he was younger, he would go and visit his grandfather who lived in Louisiana on the bayou. Now, his grandfather had lived his whole life right on this sort of waterway that was known to be haunted. Now, he said this particular summer, he went to his grandfather's house and he was going to stay for a week. So he gets to his grandfather's house and his grandfather greets him and is so excited. And he's like, "Welcome, Jonathan, come on in. And let me get you something to eat." Well, the first thing he noticed when he goes into his grandfather's house is there is this stench of something that is rotting. So he says, grandfather, like, what is that smell? Like, why does it smell like, something is rotting? And his grandfather says, oh, it's nothing, don't worry. So he thinks, oh, that was kind of odd. He also noticed one of the rooms in the house was like boarded up. And he said, grandfather, why do you have that door closed? And he goes, oh, I'm doing some repairs in that room. I just didn't want you to go in there and get hurt. So they start, talking, having a good time. And then nightfall came. And Jonathan said as soon as it got dark, his grandfather started getting really like anxious and antsy. And his grandfather told him, I want you to go in your bedroom and you lock the door and go to bed. And he's like, but grandfather, I thought we could stay up late and, tell stories and stuff. And his grandfather's like, no, go into your bedroom and lock the door. So he goes into the bedroom and he notices that his grandfather has put, this deadbolt lock on the door. So he locks the door and he lays down. Later that night, he hears kind of like a very loud ruckus coming from outside the room. And then he hears the front door open. And after that, everything was quiet. He goes to bed. The next morning, his grandfather comes inside the door and he's like, grandfather, where were you last night? And he said, oh, nowhere. It's okay. Everything's all right. Like, don't worry. And he said, well, why were you so nervous last night and made me lock my door? And his grandfather said, oh, just precautionary. So he said, like, every night he was there at his grandfather's, like, his grandfather would leave in the middle of the night and then come back in the morning. Well, the last day he is there, he goes into the bedroom, locks the door for the night, and he starts hearing that sound, like a ruckus sound coming from outside the room. This time, however, he unlocks his door, he goes out of the room. And over in the kitchen, like, he can see someone moving around kind of like really violently, and he hears all of these weird kind of gurgling sounds. And when he gets a better look at what is in this kitchen, he said it was this, muscular middle-aged man, but he had the face of what looked like a wolf. And he said this thing just noticed him and it started growling at him and snarling. It walks towards him and then grabs him by the arm. And the only thing Jonathan could think of at the time was to bite the arm of whatever this was. So he bites the arm of whatever this was and he runs into his bedroom and he locks the door. The next morning, he hears the front door open and he thinks, oh, my grandfather's home. He opens the door and he sees his grandfather coming inside. He is like completely disheveled. He's not wearing a shirt. And he notices he has this bandage wrapped around his arm in the same exact spot of where he had bit that thing that he encountered the night before. So he knew at that moment that what he seen was his grandfather. And he said he believes to this day that he's seen what is known as the rugaroo.
So have you ever been on a hike and you heard footsteps walking around you and you thought it was something paranormal? Because this story actually takes place today on my day hike. It's just me and my two dogs and we're doing our typical day hike out in the Appalachian Mountains. And we started doing what we always do, which is we just I build a little fort for me and my dogs to hang out in for the day. Creepy thing is I wasn't even out there doing my old paranormal stuff. We were just out there just doing our typical little day hike, building a fort and then starting a cute little fire. And it wasn't long after we were sitting in the fort that my dog Dakota just started growling and snarling at the back of the fort. Now mind you, Dakota's the type of dog that gets scared of literally anything. So for him to start growling and snarling like that, that's when I knew something was wrong and he wants to protect me. Now Harley, I can't really count on. She'll just go play with it. But after a minute or so of him growling and snarling, I decided to try and calm him down. And then I started listening and you could literally hear footsteps walking around our fort. The weird thing is it was a sunny day today there, so I couldn't really see anything because at first I thought maybe it was a person. So I started calling out like, hello, hello, is anybody there? It wasn't long after that before Dakota literally just ducked down. The fur on his back stood up, which is super abnormal for him because he's normally terrified of everything. So for him to just go into straight protection mode, that's when I started getting scared. Now at this point, both of my dogs are barking and the footsteps, I literally hear these footsteps continuously walking around the same area that we have this fort in. And that's when I said, okay, it's definitely time to go. So me, Dakota, and Harley, I call them, we get out of the fort. I start looking around the fort and I don't really see anything. And as you all know from my live streams, even in my live streams and in my videos, I carry my 357 with me. And here's the creepy part. At that point, I pull it out of my pocket and I say, hello? Is anybody there? I didn't hear any more of the footsteps, but I did hear in the distance something go Not even gonna lie to you guys, I got so scared, I just in one direction and then me and my dogs just took off. And I didn't even look back, but I can definitely tell you, I don't know if it was something paranormal or if there was a person out there with something sinister in mind. So obviously we decided to get home and stay out of the woods for the rest of the day, but because yes, I am crazy, of course we're gonna go back tomorrow. But for the past few hours, I have been sitting here wondering, like, was that something paranormal or was that a person out there? Either way, you guys let me know what you think down in the comments and follow for more crazy stories in my life.
The most terrifying thing ever is not exploring abandoned places because the exploring can be fun. What's really scary is reviewing what you recorded while doing it and then seeing this. It all started in the US in Denver, precisely in this building right here called the Sitting House. See, one night a couple came to this place that is abandoned and they wanted to explore it. I mean, okay, I wouldn't go there for a first date, but hey, if it's cool, it's cool. The couple started exploring this building, you know, going left or right, recording everything, until something happened. See, in this exact moment right here, this thing was caught on camera. Oh my god, bro, what are they doing already? They should be running. Well, that's exactly the problem. They did not see it. Like, yes, the guy who was recording did not pay attention to this spot, and he just kept going. He went to the left to see what's behind some windows, then he went straight forward to where the thing was, like he literally was next to it, he just didn't feel it. After that, they just kept exploring. They even saw a light right here, but you know, it could be some reflection, so not a big deal. All of this just to tell you that if you went to a place and you didn't see anything, that does not mean that the place is safe. Maybe some things were surrounding you and you just missed them.
What? Hello? Is there someone in there? I am not the police. Oh, it feels kind of eerie. I get a weird feeling over here, like a weird vibe from this whole place. Hold on.
With all respect, bro, sometimes you gotta use your eyes because how can you miss all that? But again, maybe it was just dark, so you don't know. Maybe it was difficult to see. I'm not judging.
We talk a lot about glitches in the Matrix on this page, and we also talk a lot about the paranormal. What if the paranormal can actually reach through and bend reality to connect? Because I recently came across a story that I think could be just that. And I think it's one of the most beautiful and heartbreaking things I've ever shared. This woman, back in high school, dated a guy named Bobby. Bobby gave her a bracelet with his name engraved on it. And eventually they broke up, life moved on, and she kept the bracelet and she put it inside one of her drawers. Over the years, as she dug through her drawers, she would come across this Bobby bracelet here and there. Okay, so 30 something years goes by. And then unfortunately, very tragically, her brother passes away. And as if this wasn't stressful enough, it happened to be the same week that she and her husband were moving. So literally the worst week of her life, she is also packing things in boxes, transporting and unpacking, including that drawer. She's unpacking and she drops this drawer and it hits the floor and everything spills out. So she gets down on her knees and she starts picking everything back up and putting it back in the drawer. And she comes across this bracelet and she picks it up and she's looking at it and she realizes something. The name on it doesn't say Bobby. The name that is engraved on this bracelet is now Brody, the name of her brother who just passed. I have so many chills. He says that there is no way that this should be possible. This is the only bracelet that looks just like this. It was absolutely given to her from Bobby and it had Bobby on it. And she has seen Bobby engraved in this
for 30 years. But nonetheless, now it's Brody. She says that every so often she will go and bring this bracelet back out and just to check, and it still says Brody. I don't know if it was a glitch or her brother or both, but what I do know is that something wanted her to see that bracelet and let her know that he's still there. How sweet is that story? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and if you have your own creepy story, I'd love to hear it. And if you're new here, you gotta follow for more creepy story time.
Have you ever heard of Kenny Veech? So Kenny Veech was this guy who would film himself looking for mysterious places. One day he's 40 miles north of Las Vegas, out in the Mojave Desert, when he stumbles upon this cave. And he described it as looking like the shape of an M. And he noticed as he approached this cave, he began to feel this vibration in his body. And the closer he got, the stronger the vibration became. And it got so bad that it freaked him out, and he left. Well, he goes on to post a video about this, talking about this mysterious cave that he found in the desert. And everybody comments, you need to go back there. Go and check out this cave. So he goes out there a second time, and he films it. And he shows this canyon where he said it was very similar to the cave that he'd found. But he doesn't find the cave. He sees this very large black ram standing up on the cliff. And so he posts this video. And once again, people tell him, you need to go back. Go and find this cave. So he sets out for a third time, and he tells his girlfriend, I'm going to be gone for 3 days. I'm going to this area, and he heads out. Well, after 3 days pass, he never returns. And so his girlfriend calls the police. They form a search and rescue party, and they search for him for days. They did find his vehicle, a Honda Civic, parked at the base of this trail. They also found his cell phone near a mine shaft. But when they searched this mine shaft, they did not find Kenny. And still to this day, he remains missing. And what is really weird about all of this is a couple years prior to him disappearing, he posted this video talking about how his father worked at Area 51. And he goes on to share some of the encounters that his father had at Area 51. So a lot of people think that his disappearance might have some connection to the fact that this is located in close vicinity to Area 51. Perhaps it was some sort of tunnel. He got too close and something happened to him. So what do you think? What happened to Kenny Veech? What do you think of this whole UFO disclosure thing? Now, I want this to be documented because I want you to remember this. And when these things come to fruition, I want you to look back on what I said, and I want you to remember it and say, you know what? He was right about the first part. Maybe he's right about the second part. Now, my grandmother, she used to talk about these things, about what would come in the future. And she used to do a lot of things that I thought were strange. But I realized she was preparing for what was coming. And a lot of things that she said have come true. Now, when we look at these aliens, these UFOs that they're trying to present to us, right? What's going to happen is, you will see here shortly, they will say aliens are real. And not only are they real, they've been in communication with us. And they want to speak to humanity. And they're going to present them as these people that want to heal the world, that want to help and save humanity. And they will tell you that what you've heard about them, all these lies, that they are evil and demonic, this isn't true. And they will be on TV. They will be broadcasted. They will speak to us directly. And we'll think, wow, they are so great. They can do all these things. They can help humanity. They can save us. And many people will put their trust in them, not realizing that they have alternative motives. And when that happens, it's important that you realize you are being deceived. They are fooling you. They are lying to you. And when this occurs, things will get very, very dark. Now, when you look at all these videos they've been releasing, okay, they just show like these objects floating through the sky, you know, and how they talk about them is they're just these curious extraterrestrials visiting Earth, or they are from another dimension just visiting Earth, right? You never see anything negative. We don't hear about the alien abductions. We haven't seen those files because they won't release those. They are releasing what they want us to see. I've documented several cases of alien abduction. And these things are very malevolent. They seem to be menacing, and they have an agenda that is dark. And they won't tell you about this. They don't want you to know. And you wonder what happened to all those scientists. I guarantee you they knew about all this. They knew what was coming. And they are trying to warn people. They're trying to tell people, don't be deceived. And sure enough, they were silenced. But what I'm telling you is important. You must remember that when they are presented to us, when it is made known that they are here, that they are real, be aware, know that we are being deceived. And, you know, that's when it's time to head to the hills, right? That is when it becomes time to survive, because they are going to push a very dark agenda. There's been several reports out of Washington State of people having these encounters with these random old people in the woods. Now, there was this man named Jack. Jack was from Seattle, Washington. Him and his girlfriend Katie, they decided they were going to go for a jog out near Squanami Pass on this trail that veered off the Pacific Crest Trail. Now, they had planned on going about 5.5 miles. So they get to this parking area at the base of the trail. They get out of their car and they started to jog. Well, as they got about 2 miles into their run, they noticed this woman on the trail. She looked probably in her 70s, 80s. She was completely dressed in all white. She had pale white skin, this blank stare on her face. And as Jack and Katie run past this woman, they say hi. She didn't say anything. She just kept on walking. So they go another mile, and as they're running, they see the same woman. Once again, all dressed in white. And they're like, how in the world did she get that far up ahead of us when she was going in the opposite direction? She's 70 years old. And, you know, we've been running this whole time. So they continue on. They get to the end of their 5.5 mile run. And right as they stop, they see this woman again, all dressed in white. And they said she just looked at them, smiled, turned, and just started walking off in the opposite direction. So they make their way back to their car. And as they get to the end of the trail, once again, there is this woman, all dressed in white. She looks at them and she says, I guess this is the end of the trail now. And they walk past her, they turn around, and they could see she disappeared. Like she's no longer there. So they get back in their car, and instantly both of them started feeling very ill. When they start the car, they could see it was 6 p.m. And they're like, wait a second, we left at 8 in the morning. How could it be 6 p.m.? They look at their phone. Sure enough, it was 6 p.m. So they couldn't figure out why that run took many more hours than it normally does. And they also started to feel progressively worse, to the point where they turned off their car and they ended up falling asleep. And they slept for several hours. And when they awoke, they said they had this weird feeling like someone was watching them. So they left. In this same general area on the Pacific Crest Trail, there was this other man named Gary. Gary said him and his father, they were hiking on this trail one day, and he said they were pretty deep in to where, this was a pretty secluded area, and it was pretty thick woods. We said out of nowhere, they hear someone walking through the brush. They said out of the brush, out of the woods, onto the trail, steps this older gentleman, probably 70, 80 years old. Once again, he's wearing these white dress clothes, and he's got this pale white skin. They said he looked, very out of place. And this was a hot day, and he's dressed in these very warm, dress clothes. They said he looked at them, and he said, it really is an enigma. And then they said he turned and walked back into the woods. And as they made it back to their vehicle, he said they, started their car, and they just felt like something was weird. And when they got back home, they realized it was the next day. Somehow they misplaced a whole 24 hours of time encountering these random old people that people are seeing in the woods.
Hello and welcome back to the series of spooky stories, The Haunted Tea Spill. This series is brought to you by all things spooky and ungodly amounts of paranormal activity. Featuring my cute nurse embroidered sweatshirt. It has this on the sleeve. It's super cute. They have other occupations as well. It'll be down here if you want it. Now into the story. I have a scary story for you, girl. Period, queen. My name is Chris. You can say it's my story. I don't mind. So to explain the best I can, let me start from the beginning. My grandmother had a stroke and couldn't take care of herself, so my mom and I took care of her. We had my mom's childhood home rebuilt so we could take my grandmother home for the rest of her day. So anyway, she's already passed at this point. I'm 15 years old. I was a normal teen. So of course you couldn't see my floor for clothes being all over the floor. I was lying in bed one night. I could see the light from the kitchen sink under my door shine. Side note, my door was hard to shut, so you had to shut it and hear the click to know that it was fully shut. My doorknob starts to slowly turn. I'm lying there looking at it. All of a sudden, my door pop clicks open. I think to myself, it's got to be my mama trying to scare me. No, no one was there. From what I could see. But then I heard something. Have you ever heard someone slide down onto carpet? What the fuck are they doing sliding on the carpet? I could hear a sliding sound. It went from the foot of my bed all the way around to my side. I listened closely and I hear a raspy breathing sound. And it sounds like it's copying my breathing pattern. Hold it. Hold your fucking breath. Or it's trying to. I all of a sudden suck in and hold my breath. Period. Great minds. I hear it trying to stop its breathing like I did, then breathe out. I hear it breathe out. Get me out of here. Get me out of here right now. I have a Razor flip phone back then. God, I miss those things. In parentheses, oh yeah, I was the it girl. Felt. I had the red one. I could dial and text on the phone without even looking at it. Oh my God. I used to do that in fucking class all the time. Oh my God, those were the days. Sorry, I digress. And thank the Lord that I could do that. In that moment, I call my house phone to wake my mom up. It's 3 a.m. She finally answers and I whisper, "Come get me." She says, "Where are you?" I said, "Mama, my room, hurry. Someone's in here." I pistol squat off of my bed, straight out that door and down the hall to my mom. She had her pew pew, and checked it out. Period, Mom. You got to do what you got to do. No one was there, but, and I get tears in my eyes even talking about this, there was a line where my clothes had been pushed from the foot of my bed all the way around to where I laid on my side. Fuck you. Oh my God. Hence the sliding noise I heard. I hope you enjoy my story. It's not as scary as some, but it sure rocked my world. Love hearing your story. No, that's fucking creepy. What do you mean it was trying to mimic your fucking breathing and it was like sliding across and it left a trail in your clothes? Jesus. No. I don't want to think about it anymore. I don't. Rate it on a scale of 1 to 10. 1 being the least scary, creepy, spooky, 10 being the most. If you have a story of your own that you want to submit, you can do so on the link tree in my profile. Don't forget to follow my backup account. I am super active over there because I am that girl. Who is she? I don't recognize her anymore. Social media queen. I'm joking, but seriously, I have been more active over there. I am trying to save up money for a car. So I'm doing a series called Tip the Car Jar, and I do updates regularly on that, as well as other things. And also a new series over there called The Court of Tea, where I am Judge Judy, and you are the jury. I know, it's great. Anywho, I'll see y'all at the next episode. Stay spooky, friends.
1998, a girl named Vivian said she was working in tech and living in Milwaukee, and she was self-described as a geek. She was reading scientific and tech magazines, and a tech convention came to town, so she decided to go. And at the tech convention, she met a guy she calls Steve. He appeared to be in his late 20s, and she kept running into him while watching technical demonstrations. And she said he was very average looking, but he radiated nice guy energy, which she really liked. Seeing each other a few times throughout the day at different activations at the convention, he said something to her that was very cute and charming, something like, we have to stop running into each other like this. And they started talking. They didn't talk so much about work as much as they did their mutual interests, their likes and dislikes, and it was very easy to talk to him. She felt like their conversation could possibly lead to something more, and he asked her out to dinner the following weekend. She learned that he did live in Milwaukee as she did, which she was very pleased about because she also knew that he worked for a government-run aerospace outfit. Had an international element, so she was very excited that he was close by. So they settled on an Italian place that was small and family owned, nothing fancy, and they agreed to meet. Dinner the following weekend, they again had a great time with great conversation. He kept her laughing and he was very polite. And at the end of the date, he didn't push for anything more, but instead offered to have her come over the following night so that he could cook her dinner, and he gave her the address of the place that he was renting. And because they had had such a great time both the day that they had met and on this date, she agreed. So the following night she pulls up to this address and she noticed that there was a company van out front with the logo of the company that he had told her he worked for, and inside this bungalow was a lot of comfy furniture, overflowing bookcases, and a friendly Labrador named Max. And she said he even had houseplants, which impressed her because she was like, what late 20s guy keeps houseplants? She remembers mentioning to him that she was surprised that they had never run into each other because even though Milwaukee is a city, it seemed that they would have run into each other at some point at least, given their shared interests and similarities. And that's when he told her that actually he's not from Milwaukee, he's from Nevada, and that's where he lives full time. And he's only in Milwaukee for the duration of a work contract. And he had just gotten to town and he was expected to stay for another 3 to 6 months, depending on how long the project ran. And this actually disappointed her because she was like, dang, I guess he's not close by after all. But it wasn't enough to make her leave, and she was still having a great time with him. So they got to cooking and they started drinking a little bit of wine. And she said she felt a little pleasant buzz, but she wasn't tipsy by any means. And she started to ask him what exactly he did for work. And he sort of dodged the question and then got sidetracked when he noticed a magazine that was peeking out of her backpack. This day, she said she always keeps reading material in her bag just for the occasional downtime. But on this day, the magazine that she was carrying with her was called Omni, which she didn't explain to me what it actually was, but I looked it up and it looks like Omni was published from 1978 to 1998. And it was a popular science meets science fiction magazine from what I read that published high quality science articles, science fiction, and occasional artwork, and often featured authors such as George R.R. Martin. It was a magazine that she thoroughly enjoyed and had never thought there was anything strange about it. But when it caught his eye, he told her, "You shouldn't read that." It took her by surprise because he didn't seem like the type who would tell her what she should and shouldn't read. So she was like, why not? And he said there are people using that magazine to send codes out. This struck her as extremely bizarre. He also hadn't mentioned anything that would suggest he was a conspiracy theorist. So she was like, well, what do you mean? And he says, well, I'll explain it to you. The oversized letters at the start of each article are access codes to get into the company's mainframe. He told her there were other codes and other issues that gave access to different areas, and she didn't know what he was talking about, whether he was talking about his company or something else entirely, but he said, yeah, they're really working hard to figure out who's doing that. He said, someone is leaking the information, we just don't know who. And she said, partly joking, she asked, should you be telling me all this? But he didn't laugh or smile, and instead shook his head and gave her a very serious look and said, I think everything's fine, but you should know that they're watching people who have a subscription to that magazine, and you should be very careful with who you talk to. She didn't push for more information and remained skeptical, and he didn't offer any more information, but he seemed to regret giving her that information, and the mood of the entire night changed, and the date did not go as well as the previous night or the day they first met. He just seemed distracted, and so after a little while of struggling for conversation, she decided to call it a night and walked home around 10:30. But before she left, she suggested that they meet for brunch the following morning, which was a Sunday at 10:30, and he agreed. He was like, I would love to see you again. I'll see you there. The next morning, she arrived at the restaurant where they agreed to meet a little bit early, and she was still excited to see him despite the weirdness from the night before. She was like, maybe he was just having an off night. But she got to the restaurant, 10:30 came and went, and she waited for an additional 45 minutes, and he never showed. So she called his house phone, and the number was disconnected. She knew that it had worked the day before because she had called him, so concerned, she left the restaurant and drove over to his house. But she noticed that the company van was now gone, and on the lawn was a sign for a local realtor. She noticed that the front door was slightly open, so she walked up and peeked inside, and she noticed that all of the comfy furniture, all of the bookshelves, even the dog were gone. The house was completely empty, and she stood there looking around, trying to figure out what was happening, when a realtor walked from a back bedroom up into the main living room, and she said, oh, are you in the market? And Vivian apologized, and she said, I'm so sorry, I'm looking for Steve. Did he break his lease early? And she was very confused, and she said she swore the realtor's eyes looked at her and then got hard. The realtor snapped back. She said, nobody's lived here for 7 months. And she says, no, I was here last night. Somebody was definitely living here. And the realtor, in a very mean tone, said, are you sure you didn't have too much to drink? Before Vivian could even respond, the realtor continued and said, you must have had too much to drink and gotten the address wrong. Vivian said she stood there in shock. She was so confused, and she knew that this woman was gaslighting her, but she didn't have anything to prove that she had been at the house the night before. So she said she left and went home because what else was she going to do? And she never saw Steve again. But she said for weeks afterward, all of her friends complained that anytime they would call her house phone, they would hear a clicking before she picked up. What she found even stranger was a few weeks after this encounter, she got curious and decided to look through some of her old issues of this magazine. But when she went to look for the issues, they were all missing from her apartment. She said, no one had been in my house. I have no idea where they went to this day. Let her know what you think. And if you're familiar with this magazine or you used to read it, let me know, because I would love to hear from people who are more familiar with this publication than I am.
Turn your lights on. I've got a spooky story for you. I was around 11 years old. I loved reading and would stay up all night. I had a globe lamp that got progressively brighter when you touched it, so I left it on the first dim setting. I would get in trouble for staying up late, so I kept my door cracked open because I could see into the hallway and see my mom's bedroom door. My younger sister also slept in my mom's room, so I usually had enough notice to pretend I was asleep. My stepdad was away on a business trip and was supposed to come home the next night. I was reading super late into the night when I suddenly felt like someone was in the house. I looked up from the book right as an outline of a person walked past my door. I thought my stepdad was home early, so I said, "Hey stepdad." The outline immediately paused, slowly turned towards my door and came into my room. I immediately felt absolute terror. I reached out to turn off my lamp, but it kept getting brighter and brighter as the outline came closer. I ended up trying to pretend I was asleep, but I was rigid in my bed with my eyes open. The outline came all the way into my room, stood next to the nightstand, and leaned over me. It was just a swirling shadow in the shape of a person. After a few seconds, it straightened up, turned away, and slowly left my room. Then it continued down the hall and passed through my mother's closed door. I was still so scared that I didn't get out of bed until the morning. My stepdad came home the next night. I think it would be easy to say I was an over-imaginative kid, or I must have fallen asleep reading and dreamt it. To be honest, while I was interested in spooky and paranormal stuff, I've always been a skeptic. I rationalized it away and didn't tell anyone what happened until around age 18-ish. My mom and stepdad invited some neighbors over for a football night cookout. We were in a different house at this point. After the game, we somehow turned on a ghost hunting show. It was a little out of character because my mom was pretty religious and opposed to exposure to supernatural stuff. The neighbor was super into the show and going on about how she believed in ghosts. My mom started saying she didn't really believe in the supernatural, but she had this one experience she could never shake. She said it was back when I was a kid and my stepdad would occasionally go on business trips. He was on a trip and was supposed to come home the next night. She said she was jolted awake in the middle of the night and saw a shadowy outline of a person walk through her closed door. It hovered in the corner of her bedroom watching her. She said she immediately started praying and eventually the shadow was gone. I think that was the spookiest part of the whole story. I had never told anyone what happened. I didn't want to get into trouble for staying up late or get grounded from supernatural scary things. My mom said she never told anyone her story because she didn't want to scare my sister and I, and she didn't want a lecture from her church friends and family. Oh, that is so spooky. It's spooky to know that you and your mom had the same experience, but not find out until years later while you're like sitting here like, did that actually happen? Because then you're just like getting clarification like, yeah, that happened and now I know it's real. It's terrifying. Also, it makes you wonder how many times are the shadowy figures coming into your room and staring at you at night? Like, maybe that's happening often and we just sleep through it. Like, they just happen to be awake and the mom just happened to wake up. But how many times did we not wake up and we got shadowy figures staring at us while we're sleeping? Huh. Makes you wonder.
Brujeria almost unalived my mom. Story time. This story did not happen to me, but it happened to one of you guys, so I'm gonna share the story in the first person. Back in 2012, my mom worked for a cleaning company along with 2 other ladies. Now, being that my mom has always been a very hard worker, she would constantly get compliments and would even get tips from the clients because she would always go above and beyond anytime she was cleaning at home. Now, the 2 other ladies that she worked with, for whatever reason, would always like get complaints from the customers, and a lot of people didn't like them because they felt like they weren't doing the job correctly. This made those 2 ladies mad and they became jealous of my mom. They felt like my mom was like trying to outshine them. One day while my mom is cleaning one of the clients' homes, she's with one of the ladies. The lady goes up to her and says, "Hey, we should have lunch together. I made tamales." Being that my mom has always been very like kind-hearted and trusting, she told her, "Yeah, of course, I would love a tamale." My mom eats the tamale and kind of goes about her day. When she gets home that night, she has extreme abdominal pain. She's throwing up profusely. She is in so much pain that she is literally in the fetal position on the ground. My dad ends up having to pick her up and take her to the hospital. They spend all night in the hospital. They run all type of tests, even do ultrasounds. No one can find anything wrong with her, so the doctors just tell her to go home and rest. As the days go by, her condition got worse. She couldn't keep anything down, and anytime she would try to eat anything, she would get these horrific sharp pains in her stomach. It got to a point where she just couldn't eat at all anymore and started to lose a ton of weight. She became extremely weak. Meanwhile, doctors still can't find what's wrong with her. My dad became extremely desperate and went and called my aunt and told her everything. My aunt then called a bruja. It was one of her friends, and told her to come check up on my mom. The moment the bruja walked into the house, she said that she felt like there was something extremely negative and evil in the house, that it wasn't just after my mom, but it was after me too. A lot of the times I would go with my mom to clean homes because I was young and she didn't have a babysitter, and I guess these ladies didn't like that either, so they started to attack me as well. The bruja said that there was something extremely dark and evil that was in my room, and it was only a matter of time until it would attack me. When the bruja continued to make her way to my parents' room, she saw my mom laying in the bed, completely bedridden. She couldn't even get out of bed at this point. She was on her deathbed. The bruja told my dad that my mom only had 2 days to live and that I was next. My dad told the bruja to do whatever it is that she needed to do to save the both of us. This story gets a little bit darker because now they have to do the cleansing, so I'm going to do a part 2 for this one. This is part 2 of the Brujeria story time. If you want to listen to the first part, just click right down there. So when the bruja walked into my mom's bedroom, she saw that my mom was completely bedridden and was practically skin and bones. She then told my dad that she only had 2 days to live. My dad told her to do whatever it took to save me and my mom, since I was also being affected. I'm gonna go ahead and just read this part. So as the bruja is getting ready for the ritual, she was gonna perform a spiritual surgery on my mom and a cleansing for me. Both my mom and the bruja dressed in white clothing. The house went completely dark and the bruja started doing surgery or spiritual surgery on my mom. My mom quickly started vomiting black liquid, and then it came out. It was a large 5-foot snake that was coming out of her mouth. The snake fell on the floor, and the bruja started pouring holy water on it and set it on fire. Then my mom fainted, and the bruja was finishing cleansing her. And then the bruja went to me and in my room to do a cleansing and remove whatever bad spirit was in my room. And I swear to this day that I saw this big black shadow in my mirror that kind of showed up and then disappeared. A few weeks after the cleansings were done, my mom was finally able to eat solid food and actually hold it down. After about a few more weeks, she was actually starting to gain some weight, but unfortunately her health never went back to normal. Like till this day, she's still like very sickly. The bruja then asked her if someone had offered her any sort of food. That's when she remembered that lady from her job and the tamal. The bruja then confirmed the name of the lady. She got the name of the lady right, and we knew for sure that that's how my mom got sick in the first place. The bruja ended up breaking the curse and of course sending everything back, and not long after we found out that that lady became extremely sick with the same sickness that my mom had. She had become bedridden, but in her case she actually didn't make it. She didn't survive. To this day, my mom does not trust a soul with food. We also found out that the house that the lady that did this to my mom lived in caught on fire after she passed away, and her family was left with absolutely nothing. And apparently her daughter, the lady's daughter, saw the same black shadow that I had seen in the mirror when I got cleansed. So yeah, that is her story, and I will tag her down below in both of the parts.
For one night only, filming has been allowed inside England's most haunted asylum.
Welcome to Newsham Park Hospital. Opened in 1874 as an orphanage for children whose fathers were lost at sea and their mothers were left derelict. Over the years it turned into a hospital and eventually an asylum. It's now known to be not only one of the most haunted places in the city of Liverpool, but in England.
Just before 3 a.m. in the morning, I had an utterly terrifying experience. It's left me with a sore head. Watch this.
This is one of the original mortuary trolleys, believe it or not. What they had the dead bodies on. Crazy. Oh, it's freezing. Oh my god, that's just moved. Ever so slightly, but it did. Whoa. Whoa. Is something moving that? Oh shit. Oh my god. What? Oh my god, the wheels are going. The wheels are moving. Oh! Whoa, I'm getting out of here. I'm going. That is just me.
Absolutely terrifying, but incredible nonetheless. What a fantastic location for ghost hunters, urban explorers, and fans of dark history. It was my absolute honour to be invited to this evening of expert ghost hunting by the team of Haunted Happenings UK. They have exclusive out-of-hours access to Britain's most haunted locations. After dark, of course. So upon being asked to spend the night in Newsham Park Hospital of Liverpool, a notoriously haunted building in the city, I simply couldn't decline, and I'm so glad I didn't. So, where are we and why is it haunted? Let's get down to the spooky nitty-gritty. Liverpool, like many Victorian cities during the Victorian period, suffered with high death rates, more so than others due to the dock workers. These were the days before health and safety. Your father would go out down to the docks and shipyards in the morning, and it was common for him not to return. In those days, the fathers were predominantly the breadwinners, so the mothers were left destitute, often with no decisions but to give up their children. Other couples rather selfishly decided to move away for a better life and give up their children voluntarily. So what could the city do about this epidemic? Well, the Seamen's Orphanage was opened on the 30th of September 1874 by the Duke of Edinburgh. Whilst this did give children a roof over their head, 3 square meals a day, and taught them a trade, the conditions were appalling. And that leads me into our first ghost story of Newsham Park Hospital, the Naughty Boys Corridor. This is where paranormal groups experience the most activity. It's said to be that of children that were locked away in the cupboards as punishment. So the story goes, one time the punishment went too far. A somewhat naughty child, likely having a condition that simply wasn't diagnosed in those days, was locked away in a cupboard in the dark, a tight, small space. As you can see here, pure torture. However, that staff member forgot to mention the boy's presence in the cupboard during the handover, and he was left for hours upon hours in the dead of winter. Sadly, when his absence was realised, staff opened the door to find him deceased inside. A truly appalling and neglectful way to go. It's no wonder his spirit is heard running up and down the corridors, touching visitors' hands and knocking on the doors as you patiently wait inside, inviting him forward for contact. Due to a lack of funding, the orphanage was closed in 1949 and 2 years later was bought by the new National Health Service, becoming Newsham Park Hospital. But alas, this was a Grade 2 Victorian listed building. It simply wasn't functional for a hospital and closed its doors. However, nearby Rain Hill Lunatic Asylum was in an even worse state. So they bought this building instead and moved in all of the patients. There's one story told to me by the team of Haunted Happenings of a woman tagging her friend on Facebook asking her to come along for the ghost hunt. She claims she would never step foot in here again after visiting her mother here, whom was a patient many years ago, and seeing her rocking silently back and forth in the corner tret terribly. With these appalling conditions, it's no wonder patients have returned from beyond the grave, but staff have too. A nurse who was found deceased on the staircase is the most commonly seen ghost.
This creepy story is from the user StaySilent00, who will be tagged in the comments below, but let's get right into it. When I was 8 years old, my family and I were in the middle of moving into a new trailer. We decided that we were going to be sleeping there a few nights before moving in, and brought with us the bare minimum. Our beds, some sentimental items, a couple crosses, and our picture of the Mother Mary. The very first night we stayed there, the energy was kind of unsettling. I couldn't fall asleep because I kept hearing creaking noises and doors opening and closing, so I was a little freaked out. I thought nothing of it and eventually fell asleep. After the second night, we woke up to our picture of the Mother Mary on the floor, which was strange since it was placed on a shelf behind other things. Not necessarily a place where it could be easily knocked down. I thought to myself, okay, it's nothing. It probably won't happen again. Just another weird thing. On the third night, I woke up to the sound of glass shattering. Guess what it was? Our picture of the Mother Mary again. What was even more strange was the fact that my sister was in the living room when it happened. She saw it fall and swears that nothing could have logically caused the fall. Sometime later in that trailer, our parents had gone out and it was only me and my sister in the house. Out of nowhere, we heard our front door slam, but no one was there. It terrified us, so we grabbed our picture of the Mother Mary and ran to hide in the bathroom. What happened next is still something I cannot explain to this day. Together, with the photo of the Mother Mary in our hands, my sister and I watched the bathroom faucet slowly turn on by itself. That was the end of the story that this viewer entered. But what do you guys think it was? Was it nothing? Was it paranormal? Or was it something even more sinister? If you guys enjoyed that story, drop a comment below. Let me know what you think it was. And if you have any stories of your own that you want me to tell, feel free to message me and I will tell them and tag you.
This is a res story I heard near Cherokee, North Carolina. There was this guy who said when he was younger and he lived with his parents that his dad would, at night, they had these pieces of plywood attached to hinges that they would close over the windows and they would padlock. And he always wondered why every night his dad would padlock the windows shut. Well, one day he decided to ask his father, and he said, "Father, why do you lock the windows at night? Like, what are you trying to keep out?" And his dad just looks at him and says, "You don't ask about that. We don't talk about it. Like, you ask anymore, you're going to be grounded. You're going to be in trouble." And he was like, surprised that his dad was so angry when he'd asked that question. And so he always wondered in the back of his mind, like, what was he trying to keep out of the house? Well, one night he is in his bedroom and he's having trouble sleeping. And he looks over at his alarm clock and it's exactly 3:03 a.m. And he starts hearing, and he hears this whistling, like coming from outside of the house. And he keeps hearing it over and over again. So he gets up and he goes out into the living room and and his dad is out there kind of frantically moving back and forth, pacing around. And he goes, "Dad, why are you, like, what is that whistling? Like, why are you up and what is that whistling sound? Like, are you making that?" And he goes, No, stop talking about it. Look, you need to go back into your bedroom and go to sleep. It'll be all right. And he said his dad was just like terrified. And so he went back into his bedroom and he said it went on for a little bit and then it stopped. And he said he started to realize, like, late at night, every time at 3:03 a.m., right, he would hear whistling and it would sound like it was coming from outside the house. And his dad would be up, just sort of walking the hallways, walking the floors, like freaking out. So, he was always confused about what this sound was. So one day he goes over to the neighbor's house and he goes, at night we hear this whistling sound and it happens every night, at the same time. Like, do you know anything about it? Do you hear the whistling? And he said, the neighbor said, "You need to go home right now." Like, and his neighbor wouldn't talk about it and was like creeped out and like instantly like went inside his house. So he kept trying to get it out of people in town. Like, does anybody know about like this whistling sounds that happen at night? Like, do you know what that is? No one would talk about it. So one night he is like hanging out with his brother in his bedroom, and they decided they were going to kind of stay up late telling some scary stories. Well, at like 3:03 in the morning, they hear, and they hear the whistling. And he tells his brother, like, do you hear that? And he's like, yeah. And he's like, every morning I hear that at like 3:03, and like Dad freaks out and stuff. And his brother's like, well, why don't you just like try and open one of the windows up and, see if you could get the key, unlock the padlock, and look out the window. And he's like, what? No, are you kidding? Like, Dad would freak out. Dad would freak out. And his brother's like, well, if you're not brave enough, I'll go do it. So he said his brother like snuck out into his parents' bedroom and got like his dad's keys and went over to one of the windows, unlocked it, and then moved the plywood away from the window. And when he looked out the window, he sort of just jumped back and he turned around and had just this look of dread on his face. And he didn't talk, he didn't say anything. And so he kept asking his brother, like, what did you see? What did you see? And his brother wouldn't say anything. And his brother's like, I'm going to go to bed. And he said right as his brother started walking to the bedroom, all of a sudden at the door, he hears boom, 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 boom. Someone is knocking at the door. And he hears it again. Boom, 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 boom. This loud knocking. And he goes up to the door and gets really close. And all of a sudden, his dad comes running out and grabs him and says, "Do not open that door, son." And he's like, "Why? Who's out there? Like, who's outside?" And he's like, we can't say anything about it. We don't talk about it. Like, everything's going to be okay. Everything's going to be okay. And he said all night long, they heard the knocking on the door. So the next morning when he gets up, right, his brother is very, very ill. And it's like his brother just got worse and worse and then eventually passed away. And he said he always attributed his brother what he had seen out of that window. Like, maybe that is what was the cause of what happened to him. And he said still to this day, his father will not talk about it, what was outside the house.
I used to clean houses for extra money, and there was one time a homeowner told me to avoid one specific mirror. So it was this middle-aged woman, and she lived in a very big, older house. And she always would leave for the day when I would come over, but she'd give me one specific instruction every single time, and she would say, "Okay, clean everything except for the master bathroom." Most of the time I didn't ask for a reason, but there was one day when I said, "Oh, like, why? Like, tell me about it." And she said, "That's just one mirror that I don't want touched." I remember thinking that was really oddly specific, but people are weird, so it's whatever. And I spent most of the day cleaning downstairs. Eventually I made my way up to the hallway and I started to vacuum the hallway. And as I was starting to go and vacuum in the bedroom, I noticed that the bathroom door was open. I'm pretty sure that the bathroom door was closed earlier on, so I got curious and I went over and I was gonna go close it again because I'm not supposed to go in there and clean that mirror. And that's when curiosity got the best of me, and I just took a little peek into the bathroom and I saw the mirror, and it was huge. It was very antique, vintage looking. I went to walk back out and then something caught my eye. I saw a reflection in the mirror and I thought somebody else was in the bathroom for a minute, but I noticed that it was just my reflection. And the more I was looking, I noticed that the mirror wasn't quite matching my movements, like, at the same time. So, like, I would move back and I was looking in the mirror and it would move back, but it was delayed. Or I would turn and it would turn, but again delayed. Not enough that anybody would believe what I was saying, but enough for me to notice. And I got real creeped out, so I closed the door and I went back downstairs and I continued to do what I was doing. And a couple of minutes later, I started to hear footsteps. And they were kind of pacing down the hallway. And I just wondered if the homeowner came home early or something. And so I called out hello, and the footsteps stopped. I swear I heard the bathroom door upstairs creak open, and that is when I grabbed all of my stuff and I left. And the homeowner eventually texted me that night and they asked me why I left early because I didn't finish everything that she wanted cleaned. And I told her what happened. And she responded, she was like, "That's why I told you not to go in there." She said, "You're not supposed to look in it." And I asked her what she meant by that. And then she said something that I think about all the time. She said, "Because sometimes your reflection notices you first." Now, I've heard about cursed mirrors or weird things happening with mirrors, like paranormal wise. I'm assuming that that's what it was because it was such an old antique mirror. I thought I saw a plane hovering over the desert until it started to follow us. A few years ago, a couple of my friends, we decided to go take a road trip, and we were going through kind of the Nevada desert, and it was pretty late at night, probably around 1 a.m. There was nobody else on the road, and at one point my friend actually pointed out the window and he said, "Why is this plane in the sky not moving?" It was off in the distance, like over the mountain, and it wasn't blinking like a normal aircraft would be blinking. And so we just kind of made jokes, oh, like it's a UFO, whatever. And then 5 minutes down, you could still see it, and it still was not moving. That's when we started to realize how weird it actually was, because if it was a plane, it would have passed us like a couple of minutes ago. But this was still in the same place, and as we kept looking at it, it disappeared, like somebody literally shut it off. We all saw it happen, we were all witnesses to it, and after it turned off, so did our radio, our engine cut. There was no noise. We were still rolling down the highway, but everything electronic in the car completely turned off. My friend was trying to restart the car over and over, and nothing was working, and then that's when we saw out of like the top of the mirror in the car that there was a light blaring behind us, and the light was getting closer and brighter, and then we all of a sudden had this terrible ringing in our ears, like painful ringing. We had to hold our ears closed, and then the light came like in front. You could see the reflection on the windshield. It seems like everything kind of went black for a minute, like when that happened. And then I opened my eyes and I looked over at my friend, and they restarted the car and it turned on. The radio was on, and we were about 20 miles further down the highway than we initially were, and none of us know how we got there. We checked the time, and almost an hour had passed, and none of us remembered driving or the time going by. We don't even know how we got to that point, but none of us have driven on that road ever since.
What would happen if you responded to a mimic? Now, when we hear about these encounters with mimics, there is often this invitation to let them in, to open the door, or to follow. But what would happen if you actually did? Now, there was this girl named Jill from South Carolina. She was driving home one night at 1 a.m., coming back from work. When she goes inside her house, all the lights are off. Her mom is upstairs asleep. Well, as she walks through the living room, she hears her mother's voice say, "Hello, Jill." And she goes, "Mom, why are you up so late?" And all she hears is, "Hello, Jill." She goes, okay, Mom, like, why is all the lights off and why are you in the kitchen? And she just responds, hello, Jill. So she was kind of freaked out. I was like, okay, is something wrong with my mom? She flips the lights on and there's no one there. And as she goes upstairs to her mom's bedroom, she sees that her door is closed. When she opens it, she sees that her mom is in bed, sound asleep. So she starts trying to rationalize. Okay, maybe my mom was talking in her sleep. So she just ignores it. Well, a couple days later, she said she was sitting in her bed, in her bedroom, when she sees her mom walk by. And she says, hey, Mom, can you go downstairs and grab me a bag of chips? But her mom doesn't respond. So she goes to the door, she looks out the hallway. Her mom is not there. She is not even at the house. A few days after this, she is once again in her bedroom. And she hears her mom calling for her, telling her to come downstairs. So she gets ready to go down to the hallway and she remembers, wait a second, my mom is not home. So she stays in her bedroom until her mom gets there. And finally, a couple days after this, she is coming home from a friend's house. And as she gets out of her car, she notices her mom is standing on the side of the house with her face turned. And she goes, Mom, are you okay? Like, what are you doing outside? And she hears, hello, Jill. She's like, Mom? And she's like, come with me into the woods. And she's like, what do you mean? And she goes, come with me in the backyard to the woods. And she's kind of like, that's not my mom. She runs inside the house. She closes the door and she sees her mom is there in the kitchen. So she goes to her mom and she starts crying and she says, there's something that's following me and it's pretending to be you. And her mom's just kind of like, you know, honey, it's okay. Like, there's nothing going on. Like, you're just stressing yourself out. It'll be okay. But she was insistent, you know, Mom, something is pretending to be you. Well, many months pass and she stops having these encounters. But then one night she gets a call from her mom. And her mom is like, hey, honey, I heard you calling me to go down into the basement. But I'm in the bathroom right now. I'll be down, you know, in like 10 minutes. And she's like, no, Mom, do not go down there. Do not go into the basement. That is not me. I am not at home. And her mom's like, what are you talking about? Like, are you playing jokes with me? And she's like, no, Mom, I am not home. And her mom didn't believe her. She thought she was making it up. Well, a week later, she finds that her mother had passed away. And she felt like whatever was pretending to be her mother and then pretended to be her had something to do with it. And did her mom respond to this mimic?
My husband keeps introducing me to people who aren't there. I thought he was playing a practical joke the first time he did it. I was in the kitchen making dinner and he walked in the front door mid-conversation. He gave a brief pause and then introduced me to no one, apparently called Jeff, and I gave him a quizzical glance, but he just carried on with his conversation and even like paused as if waiting for the other person to respond, and then proceeded to be, really, Eve? You can't even say hello? And I just responded, there's no one there? And then we didn't talk for a few days until the weekend when he asked me if I wanted to go have drinks with some friends. I was still cranky, but agreed, you know, he is my husband. But then we arrived to an empty apartment. My husband told me that apparently she said not to even bother knocking and just let himself into the apartment. Apparently she wouldn't hear us over all of the chatter. And then my heart began racing when I saw my husband leaning down to hug people who weren't there. He gave me names of who was sitting in each empty chair, and I was just looking around the room completely dazed and just decided to gingerly take a seat in a hopefully empty chair, because you know what I mean. And I just kind of played along. But it happened again the next week at an art gallery. It was my husband's friend's exhibition, and I almost lost it when I was standing in an empty gallery staring at empty picture frames. And when my husband started going ooh and ah over empty frames, I couldn't hold it any longer. He hissed, "What has gone into you?" And I said, you know, I'm sorry, I played along at the start, but this is a joke. There is no one in the room. And his face immediately changed to worry and said, I haven't been playing a practical joke on you. I swear. I think you need to go to a doctor. And then he would not let up about me going to see a doctor, so I finally gave in and ended up in an empty doctor's office with my husband nodding along at an empty chair. But then a week or so later, I arrived home to my husband making dinner in the kitchen. He gave me a sheepish smile, a kiss on the cheek, and said, "I'm sorry for messing with you." So a few days later, Chris was a college buddy of mine, and we recently reconnected, so he ended up inviting me and my husband over for dinner. So we show up, I greet Chris, introduce him to my husband, we just made some small talk, and my husband seemed kind of reserved, so I tried including him more in the conversation. But then after a while, Chris just kind of gave a nervous laugh and asked if everything was okay. He looked kind of awkward, his eyes not quite meeting mine, and he said, it's just that there's nobody there. My husband tells me that he's real. I mean, I can feel the warmth of his skin against mine. Like, he's my husband. I believe him.
You know what's really creepy? Toys that turn on by themselves. Now, believe it or not, this is the most common occurrence with people who experience paranormal activity. Now, there was this woman named Beth. Beth and her husband lived in this very old farmhouse with their 2 children. She said her youngest son had these fire trucks that he would play with down in the living room. And she said one night, everyone was asleep. She got up and went down to the kitchen to get a snack. Well, as she's walking down the steps, she began to see like these flashing lights. At first, she thought maybe there was a fire truck or an ambulance outside. But as she gets to the bottom step, she turns and she sees that her son's fire truck is on and the lights are flashing. So she walks over to it to go and turn it off. But right as she gets next to this truck, she said all these other trucks, the lights turned on and the sirens begin to go. And that's what she realized, like these toys, you have to physically push the buttons and flip the switch to get them to light up, to get them to make sounds. But they were all making sound all at the same time. So she runs upstairs and she tells her husband, like, something's going on with the toys downstairs. He wakes up, he goes down, the toys are off. There's no lights, there's no sounds, like everything is shut off. And this happened like 2 or 3 times where these toys would just turn on by themselves. Well, she said one night she was in bed with her husband and her daughter comes running in the bedroom and is like, Mommy, like, my toy is talking and it's saying like mean things to me. And her mom's like, what do you mean? And she goes, my Furby toy. Like, I have this Furby toy and it's like talking and it's saying like mean things about you. So her mom like gets up, goes into the bedroom, and she finds this Furby toy on the floor. It wasn't making any sound, it was turned off, but she thought, that's odd that this happened, and then before that the trucks were going off by themselves. So she takes the Furby toy out of the room, and the next day she puts it in the closet, but before she does, she takes the batteries out. So later in the day, her kids are still at school and she's home alone. She walks down the hallway and she began to hear like talking. She said, where's that coming from? Is there a radio on? Well, she realizes it's coming from this closet. She opens up the closet and there's the Furby. And she picks it up and it said, why'd you put me in the closet? Why won't you play with me anymore? And it started talking to her. So she throws this thing on the ground because she knows there's no batteries in it. She took the batteries out. And so she runs out of the house. She calls her husband. Husband comes home from work. And he goes upstairs. He looks at the Furby. He says, it's just a Furby toy. Like there's no reason it should be talking. Maybe you're just freaked out. And she said, no, she for sure heard that thing talk. And it said, why'd you put me in the closet? So a few months pass and stuff quiets down. She doesn't have any more encounters like that. But she said, then one night she awoke to the sound of like these small sounding footsteps near her bed. She said when she turned over in the bed, there was the Furby doll laying next to her. And she said it started to talk. And it said, why did you put me in the closet? Why won't you play with me? Feed me, I'm hungry. And she jumps up and she screams. Her husband wakes up. And she shows her husband like the Furby doll is in bed with us. And her husband's like, okay, I don't know what's going on, but like this is getting old. Like stop messing around. Now, this went on for like months where she kept having these weird encounters with this Furby doll. And finally, the husband's like, you know what? I'm done with this. So he takes this thing to the backyard and he throws it in a fire and he burns it in this like bonfire. And she said for a couple weeks, it felt like everything was good. But then in the middle of the night, her and her husband wake up and they hear talking like, why'd you put me in the fire? Why won't you play with me? And she looks at her husband like, see, I told you this is real. They both get up out of bed. They go downstairs. They find this burned up Furby sitting in the living room talking by itself. So they end up getting rid of this thing. And it never came back, and they never had any more issue with it. But they felt like something in the house was possessing these toys.
There is a school in Wisconsin called Hibbing High School that many people believe is one of the most haunted high schools in America. Now, specifically the auditorium. The auditorium itself is beautiful. And listen, there's a lot of pictures online, so I don't know if this is the exact auditorium, but it's something similar to this. The most interesting stories come from the stage manager who started working there in the 1990s named Chuck Perry. He himself had never had any direct experiences, but he had heard about an apparition of a woman who would often show up in dressing room number 10. There was a girl who was getting dressed, and she said that she had seen a woman in the corner of the room, and when she looked, the woman was gone. But it was after this experience that this girl had that Perry himself started having weird experiences. He said one night when he was working, the tools that he was working with just kind of disappeared, or they started showing up in different places that he knew that he had not put them. But the strangest was when he was working with a saw that he had plugged in. He had left the stage for a little bit, and when he came back, the saw was in a completely different location, not plugged in, and the cord was damaged. It wasn't cut, it wasn't severed, it was just damaged. Now, it was in the late 90s that a woman came to tour the school. This is where Bob Dylan went to school, so this is like a national landmark of some kind. I don't know if it's like official, but people do come tour the school. But she had some crystals. She had brought some crystals with her, and she had told Perry, hey, I get really strong energy from seat J47. Now, at the time, Perry didn't think much of it, but then he started noticing that J47, that seat specifically, would often, like after the ushers would come and put the seats back up, that seat would come down on its own quite frequently. Perry then saw a documentary on graveyard photography, so he decided to try something himself. He found an old Polaroid that they had on the set, and he started just taking random pictures. He took about 50 pictures in total. Now again, I do not know if these are the actual Polaroid pictures or if this is the picture at all, but what he did catch was someone sitting in seat J47. Now, this particular picture was sent off to be tested to see what exactly was going on with the film, and everything that could have possibly been wrong with the film was ruled out. The only two possibilities that were left was that it was a double negative or double exposure, or there's a ghost sitting in the seat. So what are your thoughts? Do you think it could actually be haunted, or is it all just a hoax? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments and follow for more creepy things.
Not everything in that psychiatric hospital was human. I need to tell you guys this ghost story. This story was sent into my email, and if you have any ghost stories, paranormal encounters, or scary stories that you want to share, you can send them to the email in my bio. I was admitted when I was 13 to a psychiatric hospital in South Africa. The hospital wasn't anywhere near my home. It was about a 40-minute drive to get to it from the front door, so already everything around me was completely unfamiliar. And the moment I stepped inside, I felt it. It wasn't my nerves, it wasn't anxiety or me being shy. This was dark and it was heavy. Eventually, I was signed in and taken to the adolescent ward. It was a Monday afternoon, about midday, and I soon quickly realized that I was the youngest one there, by a lot. So, right off the bat, I was already feeling isolated, out of place, and alone. That night, after tea time, was medication, and then we were all sent to bed. In this ward, all of the girls shared one big room. There were 6 beds, all lined up neatly, fluorescent lights above our heads, and no windows. Just a large locked glass door with gray privacy film. My bed was in the corner of that room, which gave me a perfectly clear view of the entire space. Every bed, every closet, every shadow were all in my line of sight. Eventually I fell asleep, but not for long. I woke up suddenly. I didn't know what time it was. We weren't allowed a clock in our room, but I remember noting that the room was still very dim, with only a sliver of light coming through the large locked door. And eventually my eyes adjust to the darkness. And in the opposite corner of the room, behind one of the beds, right next to the closet, was a face peeking out at me. At first, I couldn't see the entirety of it, just the eyes, but they were enough to put me on edge. They were far too wide to be normal, and were stretched in a way that didn't belong on anything, much less something human. And then I noticed the pupils, and even from across the room I could tell how endlessly dark they were, and they were focused directly on me. To this day, I still can't explain it, but the second I locked eyes with it, I was overcome with a sense of pure evil. I don't know how long I sat there staring at it. Maybe it was only a minute, but it felt like a lifetime. Finally, I forced myself to move. I slammed my head back down onto that rock-hard pillow, and I didn't move again the entire night. I refused to even turn my head in the slightest for fear that I might accidentally see it again. After that night, I knew something had changed. I don't know what it was, but everything was different. Every single night, I would wake up, always in the dead of night, always when the rest of the girls were fast asleep, and always when everything was too quiet. Every time I would wake up on high alert, my adrenaline would kick in, and it would make it impossible for me to fall back asleep again. One Saturday night, we were all in the gym area when I got up to ask the nurse if I could use the bathroom. And she gave me the leave to go alone. Now, the thing is that we were never allowed to go anywhere alone. But for some reason, that night, she let me go unattended. So, with my small amount of freedom, I walked down the corridor past the nurse's station, where there was a window along the wall, and into the bathroom. As I was in there, that familiar and uncomfortable feeling came back, crawling up my spine and wrapping itself around my nerves. My hands started sweating, my body was shaking, and I could feel my veins turn to ice. I got out of there as quickly as I could and made my way back past the large window. That's when I saw it. Not just the eyes this time. Its whole face. Those same endless eyes. A mouth full of rotten teeth with the roots exposed, almost gumless, and it was grinning at me. Grinning impossibly wide and unnerving. In my fear, I sprinted back to the gym and refused to be anywhere by myself after that. A week went by and nothing happened. I started to think that maybe it was over, but was never fully able to relax. Eventually, my 3rd week came around, and it was the Monday before I was set to discharge on that Wednesday, so I spent the days excited counting down the hours. That night, we stayed up and talked for a bit before falling asleep, and like clockwork, I woke up, facing the wall this time, but I almost immediately knew that something was wrong. That same feeling overcame my body, and with it, I felt weight. Something heavy was pressing down on the edge of my bed, right behind me. And then, the breathing. Slow and heavy and wet, right against my neck. I couldn't move. Tears started forming in my eyes, and then suddenly, Almost as if it hadn't been there at all, it stopped. The weight lifted, and it was gone. My last night there had to be the worst, though. It was Tuesday night, and I woke up. I had to use the bathroom, so I got up, padded over. The way the lights were set up was they were motion censored, so they would come on when you entered the stall. And as I was in there, the light shut off. I was left in pitch black. I was about to open the door to trip the light again when suddenly they came on their own. I figured one of the girls had come in after me and made them come on, so I walked out when I was finished and walked towards the sink, and then the lights went off again. And that's when I heard it. A whisper coming from one of the shower stalls. My name. It sounded like one of the girls. Tiff, it said. Small and almost kind. So I answered her, told her to stop messing with me, but I got no response. I walked back to my bed, and that's when I heard it again. Closer and louder and more urgent this time, and that's when I knew. It wasn't who I thought it was. I got into my bed slowly, facing the wall again, and I could feel it. At the foot of my bed, crouched there. And in half a second, whatever was there reached up and grabbed my ankle hard and tight and started pulling me off the bed, trying to drag me. At this point, I didn't think. I just screamed, as loud as I could, desperate to be free of this thing's clutches, and the second I did, it let go. Everyone woke up. The nurse came in. They calmed me down, and eventually everyone but me went back to bed. Morning finally came. My bags were packed. I was discharged, and I didn't say anything. I just left as fast as I could.
Faces only a mother could love. When the door swung open, I said, "Hi, honey, how is the new school?" And my daughter, Melissa, just threw her bag down and off. She said it's awful, and when I asked what happened, she said that it was this one girl, Lily Hall. She's so mean. And then my heart broke, and she started to cry. Apparently, she told my daughter that she was fat and ugly, and embarrassed her in front of everyone. And I tried consolidating her, put my arm around her, and said, "Oh, honey, you know that's not true." And she said, "But it is. I hate this body." In truth, I had myself to blame. I'd brought us here, insisted that the move would be good for us. It was our third in as many years, though. You know, new faces, new places. It's always a big adjustment, and I assumed that she just needed some more time. But as the days wore on, the bullying only got worse, and she wasn't sleeping. The dark circles under her eyes were just ever present, and she started picking at her skin, which seemed to almost start sagging under the weight of all of her stress. But after this week, I promised Melissa that we would fix things with Lily and her mom. So that Saturday, Melissa and I had just finished setting the table when I heard a knock at the door. "Miss Hall," I said as I opened it all wide. "Please come in." So Lily's mother sauntered in, a bleach blonde twig named Rhonda, and Lily was following right behind her, your classic elementary school mean girl. And Melissa was just staring at the ground as I motioned for them to sit down, and Lily shot Melissa a nasty grin. And Rhonda began, "So miss, you say that our girls don't get along?" And over the next half an hour, I just laid everything out, and Rhonda said nothing, while Lily was just sneering with satisfaction. And suddenly, Rhonda stopped me and said, "I think I see the problem." So I was relieved, and I began, "You do? Oh, that's wonder." Rhonda interjected and said, "You and your daughter are new here. You don't get it." Then Lily giggled and said, "We don't make friends with losers," making my daughter start to squirm. I couldn't believe what I was hearing, and my daughter looked at me almost desperately as they started rising to leave. And Rhonda said, "I think we're done here," and turned towards the door. So I hissed, "No, we're not." And we were on them before they could even react. You know, I grabbed Rhonda by her hair, and my long, thin tongue wormed down her throat before she could even react. Not a drop of blood spilled either, as my venom did its work, just making the flesh loosen upon their bones, almost like an ill-fitting sock. And for just a moment, you know, we didn't have to hide, so as my skin unraveled like crimson string, I made sure that she saw my real face. When it was done, I apologized to Melissa because we would have to take on yet another role, you know, a new mask. But she said, "It's all right, Mom," as now Lily Hall's eyes stared into her mother's. This one's a much better fit. As they fished a set of car keys from the empty clothes on the floor, I smiled, said, let's go home. That was a good year.
I need to preface this by saying I'm not 100% sure this is real. But, like, the way that they're talking to her, it feels like it's not a skit. I don't know how to explain it. Just watch.
Where'd you just come from? I took the wrong way. Oh my goodness.
Did you see my other two guys? What?
What?
Did you see my other two guys? Did we see your other two guys? No. You're supposed to go that way.
No, we're not supposed to go that way.
No. Want to meet them?
No, we don't want to meet him. How about not? I don't know. 3. Oh my goodness.
What?
I thought that was somebody else.
She keeps following them. And I think the creepiest part of this is, like, the voice change. That freaked me out bad.
We listen, we don't get scared, and we don't judge. Let me give you guys a story time of this man who was a ritualist and was given a snake on the condition that he never goes to the graveyard when somebody dies, and when his children dies, they have to get cremated. Also, he has a lifespan of 10 years. So there is somebody that I know that went to initiation school at this particular person who gives people snakes to have money and all of that. And they're the ones that shared the story with me. So this person tells me that when you come to this particular person to want a snake or some sort of thing to make you have money, you are going to live for 10 years and that's it. You're going to enjoy the fruits of your labor and that's it. But somebody has to take over whatever that you did. And also, if you're a woman, your girl child has to take over your snake or whatever. If you're a man, a boy child has to take over your snake or whatever. And again, they also get to live 10 years. And they have to make sure that they get married within that space of 10 years and have a child somehow. The child does not have a choice but to join the ritual, because as soon as they are born, you initiate them into this whole thing that by the time you die, they take this thing whether they like it or not. The conditions again were that he's not allowed to go to the graveyard because whatever snake spirit that they give him does not like graves, and it might happen that you go to the graveyard, the whole time the snake spirit is with you, and then you go to the graveyard and then they stay there because they use, even though you have a physical snake, they use the spirit of somebody that has died. So that person could literally just go back to their grave even if it's not the same graveyard that they were buried in. For as long as it's his physical child, you are not allowed to take your child to the graveyard. They have to get cremated. Cool, this man takes his snake home. He does whatever he needs to do, you know. Fortunately for him, there are women out there that just love money without thinking. He gets married, he gets his kids. Obviously, his 10-year lifespan is going. I think he had like 5 kids from the same woman, because unfortunately for him, he kept on getting girl, and then finally he got a boy. Oh, I forgot to mention, guys, the 10-year lifespan starts as soon as you get a boy, right? If you fail to get a boy, eventually you have to go back, and I don't know, like the process, but you have to go back to this ritualist, because if you do not get a boy child, then, you know, you're unable to, you know, progress and get your riches further. And you know that if you're a ritualist and you don't do things accordingly, you're just going to lose your riches and just lose your mind. Unfortunately, in this one, you don't lose your riches. If you dare not do things accordingly, you die. Same time. So now, this particular spirit now wants to test if this man listened. One of the children, I think it was the third born, fell sick and died instantly, y'all. Fell sick today, died later today. And, you know, this man convinced the wife that, no, I personally don't want to go to the graveyard. I want to cremate this child. We'll just have a memorial service and that's it. The wife agrees. So now, this one child dies and they do things accordingly. Unfortunately for him, the other kids now start falling sick and dying. Like, apparently the third born died today, right? Fell sick today, died today. A month or two later, another kid dies. A month or two later, another kid dies. Like, it was just crazy. It was a pattern. All of these kids, not all of them, but 4 of these kids die. Only one is left, and it's the girl. The boy even died as well. Now the guy is questioning like what's going on. He goes back to this person that helped him get the snake and was like, hi, I did things accordingly with the firstborn. I don't understand what happened, blah blah blah. The person is like, you did not tell us that you had a child before all of this. And he's like, no, I did not. And the guy is like, listen, the traditional healer, witch doctor, whatever, was like, listen, think back. You have a child somewhere, and that child died not so long ago, and that child was buried. Didn't we say all your children, as long as they come from you and they have your DNA, they must be cremated? He's like, I don't have a child. So the guy obviously continues being like, remember, and gives this guy, the guy who went to go get the snake, he gives this guy a name, and is like, this lady, you don't remember who she is? He's like, oh. Apparently, he had a child outside that he had denied. So, unfortunately, that child fell sick. That child was the first test. You know, the third child dying was the second test, basically, but he thought it was the first test. And the person who told me the story was like, the man who came to get the snake or whatever was so shameless. Like, he did not care if kids have to die or who has to die so that he can get his money or whatever. So the guy, the traditional healer is like, listen, go back and cremate that child. Convince the mother somehow that you guys need to cremate the child. So obviously the guy goes back. They tell him that you have 2 weeks, otherwise you're gonna lose every single thing that you have. Okay, 2 weeks go. Oh, he goes back home, and I think he looks for the mother. The mother is like, listen, I'm not giving you that child's body. You said this was not your child. Now why you back? Because you want to cremate. You didn't even know that he had died. Blah 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 blah. Guy goes back and he's like, listen, the mother refuses, whatever. And the traditional healer is like, make a plan. If you have to go there at night and steal the body, do exactly that. Guy does not know where this boy child's grave is, so he searches and searches and searches and doesn't find it. Eventually goes back to the mother and like, can you please? And the mom is just like, no, you have hurt me. Now God has hurt me and taken my child. I'm not telling you where the child's grave is. You want to stay like this. And I think apparently the child's mother had been told that the father is doing bad things and he just wants to, you know what I mean. 2 weeks was up and he could not come up with a solution, you know, to get that child and cremate the child so that everything goes back to par. So the traditional healer tells him like, listen, I can't help you if you don't bring back that child, because remember the conditions. And this man fell sick within 2 weeks and he passed away. The wife lost her mind. Like the wife, I don't know, I think the wife just was mentally ill after all of this. I mean, losing 4 kids and losing your husband after. Now the one child that survived was staying in the house. I don't know what happened to the house. The house got infested with something. They sprayed pesticide. I don't know what that pesticide was. Flammable. The house burned. The businesses just shut down. You know, it was just crazy. You know how when you go to a person to get a snake, you will lose everything same time. There's no time limit for when you're going to lose your things. So the girl child is left in this world alone with a mentally unstable mother who is in a mental institution because, you know, and she's just left alone trying to fend for herself. And yeah, life has been hard for her because recently this person that told me the story is like, recently she came to her as a traditional healer because she's done now. She came to her and asked for help, and this person was like, listen, like, this is what happened when you were a child, you know, telling her about the dad's rituals and all of that. Like, you basically need to just, I don't know, you need to detach yourself from your father's things completely, because what he did was something that was rooted to ruin you guys from generations to generations. And I was like, honestly speaking, if the traditional way doesn't help, guys, just go to God. Just go to God. Because this person that told me the story is like, I could not help her. You know what I mean? Because I knew what the dad did, and I was there when the dad did this. It's just a coincidence that she decided to come and get help, seek help from me. But I couldn't help her. And I was like, why didn't you just tell the child to kneel down and pray? And you know, the person was just like, I feel bad for her, but yeah.
Did anyone else grow up hearing the terrifying story called high beams? The story starts with a girl who attends a basketball game at her high school. Shortly into her drive home, she notices a truck driving behind her. As she's watching this truck in her rearview mirror, she notices that every time she turns, the truck does too. Every time she speeds up, so does the truck. So she starts to worry that the truck might be following her. And suddenly, the truck is tailgating her and flashing their high beams over and over again. That's when she really starts to feel uneasy. So she tries to speed away, but the truck just continues following her, flashing his high beams along the way. Finally, the girl is almost home, and as she pulls into her driveway, she immediately jumps out of the car and races inside to the safety of her home. But the truck pulled in right behind her. Now, watching from the window, she yells for her father to call the police. And when police arrived at the home, they find the man in the truck armed with a gun. But the man is insistent that he isn't the one they should be arresting. He points towards the inside of the girl's parked car. So police approach the car cautiously and peek inside the window. And that's where they find a man crouched behind the driver's seat with a knife in his hand. The man had slipped into the girl's car just before she left the basketball game, and the man in the truck saw it all happen but had no way of stopping it. So he followed behind her car, and each time the man in the back seat raised up to stab the girl, he flashed his high beams, and the killer would drop back down behind her seat to avoid getting caught.
Might have known the story of real life boogeyman.
Wow, guys, it's definitely happening. It's definitely happening. So our government is releasing the information about alien, the files. That's what they call them. And it contains footage, images of UFOs, different type of UFOs, different type of interviews and articles about UFOs, and it's all there for you to access. Last year, I got my phone and I step outside right here in my little place where I'll usually sit and think about these things. And I made videos about how 2026 was going to be the year of everything. Everything was going to come into light. And look what's happening. It's going. It's actually happening. And about a few days, I made a video about the whole Spirit Airlines situation. I told you guys. Air traffic was going to be the number one, way of traveling. The number one aspect of what's happening right now. And air traffic was going to be no more. You hear me? Do you hear what I'm saying? No more. No more air trafficking. And what has been happening lately? Spirit Airlines closing. American Airlines, JetBlue. Flights are actually being canceled out of nowhere with no certainty, no reason at all. Delayed flights, flights are a little way too expensive for people to travel. Then we have a whole virus thing going on. Apparently, we might look at another pandemic, even worse than COVID-19. What? We're looking at how high gas prices right now. We're looking at our president Donald Trump saying he's probably going to be in office for another 8 or 9 years, as he is the last U.S. elected president. The last. You hear the key word? The last. Like Elon Musk saying that this is officially the last presidency. Other people saying that they've had dreams that this is probably the last year of most holidays, such as Thanksgiving, such as Mother's Day, Father's Day, and especially Christmas. This is the last one this year that we get to celebrate. There's a whole lot of last, this and that that's about to happen this year. And if you are breathing right now, you're watching this video, whatever you're doing, you need to be thankful. You need to literally grasp upon it, enjoy it, and love it. Hug your loved ones. Let them know how you feel today. If you have grudges over anything, over anyone, this is the time that you make amends. You apologize. You move on. You heal. You quit the bad habits. You stay home. You attract peace into your home. You love on yourself. You heal, from your from your wounds, your past. This is the year to actually connect with your spiritual self. Be on a higher vibration, because what's about to happen, if you find yourself on a lower vibration, you are going to be the victim of it all. Don't fall for forced narrative, because this government, our government officials, our elites, they want to force every bit of false movement up on us, actually. And it's up to us to take the truth and let them be with their lies, because that's what they've been doing our whole human existence. They've been lying to us, giving us a false system just to imprison our mind. They're not doing that this year, and that's how we make it out. We take the truth, we leave the lies where it belongs, with them.
Trigger warning, if you don't do good with gruesome cases, I'd leave now. The year is 2010. We're in Sweden in the small town of Skara. Something unspeakable is about to happen, something that would haunt an entire country. And no one would carry that weight longer or more painfully than a 9-year-old little girl named Jamie Lee. But to backtrack to 1978, when in Sweden, a baby by the name of Jamie Daniel was born. He later changed his name to Isakin Dubred, and he had a very tough upbringing. From what we know, which isn't much, but it sounds like even throughout his childhood, there were signs that he would more than likely be heading down the wrong path. It also wasn't uncommon for him to be constantly in and out of different mental institutions, and he did go down the wrong path. As he grew up, he got involved with the wrong people, started committing petty crimes, and got in trouble with the law several times for theft and other offenses. By 2009, when he was in his 30s, he found himself at a psychiatric clinic, and it was there that he met a woman called, I'm going to try to pronounce this correctly. I've watched so many videos about this case and I'm trying my best. Her name is Hella Christensen, and the two of them had a ton in common. They both struggled with mental health issues. They both had a criminal history and previous past convictions. Both of them were also parents. Hella had multiple children who lived with their father. She did not have custody of any of them. And Isakin had a daughter that he stayed in touch with. So the two of them start a relationship. They both get out of the psychiatric clinic, and sooner than later, Hella is introduced to Isakin's daughter, Jamie Lee. And Jamie adored Hella. They had a very close relationship. She definitely saw her more as a second mother rather than just her father's girlfriend. But because she loved her so much, it only made it that much harder for Jamie to sit through and witness the constant arguments that happened between her and her dad. Isakin and Hella arguing loudly and passionately was a common thing, and when they got into it, they got into it. It was never just a disagreement. Even if it was something that started off small, it escalated into a lot of yelling and throwing things around the room and saying things to each other that you should never say to a person that you claim to love. In regards to the dynamic, Jamie has described the relationship between her dad and his girlfriend as a toxic horror movie one. And it sounds like Jamie did live primarily with her biological mother, but she was often at Isakin and Hella's apartment to spend time with both of them as well. And growing up with Isakin as her dad was very different for Jamie, because as a child, it felt like Jamie Lee lived in two separate worlds. She described her mother's home to be loving and normal, but when it came time for her to visit her dad, she experienced the dark side. There was never any light in his apartment, and I mean that literally and figuratively. Isakin had a fascination with the devil, and his apartment was decorated with pictures and drawings of the devil and demons. Jamie's time spent with him felt like a lot of psychological manipulation, horror movies, and brainwashing sessions, because Isakin would often talk about the dark side and about how he wanted Jamie to experience it with him. He was constantly playing scary, gory movies that he would force her to watch. Another example is that he would want her to see the demons and the spirits that he said were watching her, and he would make her stare at something in the room asking if she could see them. She would say no, and remember, this is a little girl. She would say no, but then Isakin would encourage her to try harder, to think harder, until she would agree that she saw them. One time when she was little as well, she was sleeping over at his place. They were both in her bedroom. He was sitting on her bed, and they were about to go to sleep when he looked at her and asked her, "What would you do if you heard me calling your name from the kitchen right now?" You would realize that it wasn't me sitting behind you right now. It would be something or someone else. Saying that it would be like a demon actually sitting behind her if her dad was in reality in the kitchen. And Jamie was like, "What? Dad, don't say that." And Isakin just thought it was hilarious. He just started laughing. Jamie Lee has also said, like, it felt like her father wanted her to be afraid of him or of something else or of both. And don't get me wrong, she would say that she loved her father and she thought that he loved her back as well more than anything in the world. The two of them did have some happy memories together, but there was just this dark side about him that he would talk about all the time, and that kind of just took over everything in his life. And when something happened that would trigger him and make him angry, Jamie knew that she had valid reasons to be afraid of her dad. She learned to be scared of her father at a very, very young age. She has said that when he got angry, it was like his eyes would go black and she would look at him and all she would see see was anger and evil. She didn't even recognize her dad when that happened. November 12th of 2010 was an ordinary Friday in Skara, and the day started off like any other. Isaacin and Helle woke up around noon. They got dressed. They went out shopping together. When they got home later in the day, Jamie Lee went over to see them. And as soon as she went over there, she could tell immediately that something was off. Isaacin wasn't speaking. Helle wasn't speaking. She wasn't even speaking to Jamie, which was very, very weird because remember, the two of them had a pretty close relationship. Jamie Lee sat down and Helle started preparing food and cooking in the kitchen, and when the food was ready, she handed it over to her and said, quote, "Enjoy this. It's the last meal I will ever cook for you because Isaacin is going to," end quote. Chills went down Jamie Lee's spine, but what was she supposed to do? She was 9 years old. She was scared of her dad and also confused as to what really was going on. Jamie's mom ended up picking her up from the apartment that night, thankfully, but that was the last time that she would ever see Helle alive again. Once it was just the two of them in the apartment, Helle went over to lie down on a mattress to rest. Isaacin then took a nap in the kitchen, walked over to Helle and sat on her shoulders, and then he slit her throat. Helle did not have time to resist. She didn't have time to fight back. She was gone almost immediately. But he did not stop there. And again, trigger warning, very graphic. He didn't stop there because then he removed a lot of body parts into separate pieces, including the head. He then walked over to the kitchen area and he cooked them. He prepared them to eat them. He fried them in a frying pan and then he ate them. He ate a lot of them. The man who had once been Jamie Lee's dad had become something else entirely. And shockingly, after he was done committing the crime and after he was done eating, he called the police to tell them what he had just done, saying that once they show up, they wouldn't have to use any force to arrest him because he was as calm as could be. He also stated, quote, "I want to do the right thing for myself. What I have done now, I have no idea that I actually done it, but I have woken up," end quote. Police officers were then dispatched to the apartment where he was taken into custody. When they questioned him, he confessed to everything, saying that he was a dangerous person when he was off of his medication and he knew that. And he described the events that happened like a movie, saying that he didn't know why he did it, only that he felt like there were multiple people in the apartment at the time and it felt like a movie scene to him. I will spare you the details of that crime scene, but whatever you're imagining in your head, make it 10 times worse. I mean, there are not pictures of the crime scene online, at least that I could find, thankfully, but 9-year-old Jamie Lee found out about what her father did in a way that no child, no person ever should. She accidentally saw the newspaper and she stared at a word that she did not yet understand. It was her mom that told her about Helle first, and when she told her that she was gone, her entire world came crashing down because she loved her. She loved her like a second mom. And Jamie Lee, as soon as her mother told her, she knew that her father had done it. She knew that her father was behind it. She had seen them fight. She had seen him angry. She had heard the things that he would yell and talk about, and she just knew. So she asked her mom if it was her dad, and her mom just said yes, refusing to give her any details. It was when she saw the headlines the next day that she realized that things were so much worse and so much more brutal and gruesome than she could have ever imagined. Quote, "I accidentally saw the newspapers. I did not know what the word meant, but when I was 13, I read some articles and then I understood what the word meant. But by then, my dad had me wrapped around his finger. He made himself the good person and his girlfriend was the villain. He brainwashed me to believe that," end quote. So like I said, Isaacin was arrested almost immediately and he fully confessed. The following day, a forensic psychiatric evaluation was ordered and those results showed that he was very, very mentally ill. They also showed that with his illnesses, he suffered from a ton of side effects, one of those being hallucinations. When police searched the apartment, they found all the evidence that they needed to be able to prove that everything that Isaacin had confessed to was true, along with other eerie items that he kept inside of his apartment, such as a painting of a portrait of a man who had been feeding something dark in himself for a very long time. In 2011, he was found guilty and committed to a psychiatric facility rather than a conventional prison. From inside that institution, rather than reflecting on what he had done, what he kept his attention on was continuing to pull at Jamie Lee like a puppet master. He truly believed that him and his daughter Jamie had a purpose related to the dark side, and he would tell her, "Even if you don't see what I see now, you eventually will, and the demons will guide you and you will become more powerful than I am." Those are the things that he was saying to her ever since she was a child, and he continued to talk about the same things even after he was convicted. Quote, "My dad definitely brainwashed me and had done so since I was 3 years old. He has always exposed me to the dark side with the devil and demons and evil spirits, and that has always been a part of my reality, a part of my everyday life," end quote. Inside the institution, Isaacin Dubred continued to be the same person he had always been. In December of 2011, he became engaged to another patient, a woman called Michelle, a woman known to the media as Vampire Woman, woman who had also been convicted and an inmate at the same psychiatric hospital. Together, the two of them mockingly would make blogs and talk about their crimes like it was something funny, it was something that they were proud of from the hospital's computer, with absolutely no regret in regards to the terrible things that both of them had done, which then led to a motion in the Swedish parliament to prohibit internet use for patients inside of those Swedish psychiatric institutions. In 2017, Isaacson made headlines again after selling voodoo dolls and other art containing bodily fluids. He was selling them online from inside the hospital. The voodoo dolls were made from toilet paper, toothpicks, and sewing thread, with the bodily fluids used to keep them all together. Meanwhile, his daughter Jamie Lee watched everything from the outside, trying to also heal from all the trauma that she had. She still struggled to understand why her dad was the way that he was, and she struggled heavily with anxiety and depression for many, many years going into her adulthood. Jamie did not see her father for 2 years after the crime, but she went down the wrong path a little bit because she didn't know how to deal with everything that she was feeling. And at that time, when she was at her most vulnerable, her dad managed to reel her back in. Because she wasn't being the best version of herself, her mom wasn't supporting the behavior that she was showing, but her dad was there to say, hey, I will love you, I will support you, and I hope that you grow up to be like me. So throughout her teenage years, she kept in contact with him until one incident where he became completely out of control and scared her so bad, showing Jamie that he had not changed. Then she cut off contact with him completely and focused on getting better herself. I think the little girl in her was clinging to this idea, this version of him that she needed him to be, because even after the crime, she still saw him as her dad, even though every headline and every newspaper was rightfully so painting him out to be this evil monster. It was October of 2024, 14 years after the crime, when Jamie Lee decided that she was ready to face her dad again. She walked into the facility to face her father. This was on camera. This is all filmed. You can watch it. Quote, he started crying and hugged me and seemed happy to see him. I so wanted to believe that he had changed and that he had become the dad that I always wanted and needed, end quote. But the man that she was hoping to find was not the man that was sitting across from her. He was still holding on to the same beliefs that he always had, in my opinion, very, very clearly mentally unwell still. And Jamie was older now. It's actually such a sad interview to watch because you can tell just like from what she's saying to him, the way that she's looking at him, that she wants him to be better so badly. She wants a relationship with her father so badly. And he's just... there's something wrong. Jamie was also 23 years old, I believe, and she just knew that this relationship was with her father, and dealing with him was just not something that she could carry with her for the rest of her life. In that meeting, her dad tells her, quote, you are extremely brave. And she responds with, quote, no, I just loved you. Which is so sad. I have goosebumps because you can tell that she wanted to love him so badly. After meeting with him that time, Jamie made up her mind that she would never, ever in a million years let him be a part of her life again. Jamie Lee is now a mother. She is healing. She's working on herself, and she has spoken out about her story publicly multiple times. And I'll end this video with a quote from her that I find fitting. Quote, sometimes I just want to go back in time and hug myself. My goal with sharing my story has always been to make people realize and believe that anyone can make it, no matter where they come from, no matter how broken they are. If you suffer from PTSD, if you suffer from trauma, I believe that everyone on this earth can get out of any darkness. Yeah, it's horrible. That is all from me today. Let me know if you've heard of this case before. And yeah, thank you for spending time with me today. Hope you guys are having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day. Make somebody happy, and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you.